So thank you for joining today's presentation on research misconduct and integrity. My name is Liza Bundesen, and I work in the NIH Office of Extramural Research. I'm your moderator for the next 45 minutes. And I'm pleased to introduce our presenters, Dr. Ranjini Ambalavanar, scientist investigator in the Division of Investigative Oversight, Office of Research Integrity, and Dr. Patricia Valdez, NIH Chief Extramural Research Integrity Officer. The format today includes a short pre-recorded presentation followed by Q&A with our presenters. While the presentation is playing, our presenters are available to answer questions in the Q&A box. So let's get started.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our session on research misconduct and integrity. This is going to be a joint presentation between the NIH and the Office of Research Integrity. So today, your speakers are myself. So my name is Patricia Valdez. I'm the Chief Extramural Research Integrity Officer at NIH in the Office of Extramural Research. And my colleague from the Office of Research Integrity is Ranjini Ambalavanar, and she is a scientist and investigator. She'll be joining me as well. Okay, so we want to start off by just, showing you this graphic. Really, the emphasis here is that, everyone is responsible for the integrity of the research and research process. That includes the funding agencies such as NIH, the Office of Research Integrity, ORI, institutions and universities, journals, as well as individual researchers. So we all work together to protect, again, the research and the research process and the integrity of that research. Stewardship is also important. We want to make sure that we're good stewards of taxpayer dollars. And we also want to make sure that we're protecting any human research participants or animals or the environment when we conduct research. So again, integrity is something that's everyone's responsibility. And so we all need to work together to make sure that, we reach that goal. So then in the next slide, I'm going to show you, give you an overview for how NIH handles allegations in the Office of Extramural Research that come to us in the Office of Extramural Research. So we do have a review process. We handle many different kinds of integrity concerns, including research misconduct, harassment, including sexual harassment, grant fraud, foreign interference allegations, and peer review integrity allegations. So, we don't, again, our office does not conduct investigations, but when we do receive an allegation, we have a system where we enter the allegation, we do an initial assessment, and depending on the outcome of the assessment, we can do several things. So we may contact the institution to inform them of the issue. We might remove an individual from peer review service if it appears that their service would not be appropriate. We could refer the allegation to an agency or office with oversight responsibility. For instance, if we receive an allegation of research misconduct and our initial assessment determines that this NIH funding is involved, for instance, and it looks like it's a credible and specific allegation, we'll then refer it over to ORI. In more egregious cases, we may take administrative actions, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. There's also regulatory actions that we may take, and those are much more severe actions. Those are mainly actions against institutions, and I'll talk more about that later too. But just wanted to just let you know that we do handle allegations, all different kinds of allegations, and we handle them in the same process. So I'm going to hand it over to Ranjini now.
Thank you, Patricia. So I am from Office of Research Integrity. And so we focus mainly on research misconduct, investigation, oversight. We know many scientists conduct research with high degree of integrity, and that's what contributes to our advancement in science. But different labs have different degree of integrity. And as you see in this lab one situation, they have high degree of integrity. And the blue shaded area shows some form of questionable research practices or sloppy science, and then the red indicate actual outright research misconduct. So as Patricia mentioned earlier, the integrity is much more than outright misconduct. And so this is lab one, but there are different degree of this process or like the behavior in labs. There's a lot of questionable research practices and sloppy science in this second example. And yet this lab 3 has even more. So what is happening here? And if you start out as lab 1 and then you get to a situation and getting used to this slippery slope, it can actually lead you into the lab 3 situation, and you can be accused of research misconduct. And we will see in my following slides what happens when you are accused of research misconduct. So what are the slippery slope and what you should watch for? Don't take shortcuts, don't cheat, don't do beautification. You can do beautification to an extent, and you can justify that, but then it takes you to the red area, so be watchful. So we have to be careful in not reaching into the research misconduct. So let's see, what is research misconduct? According to the PHS policies on research misconduct on my right, and we follow this regulations when we oversee, it is defined as fabrication, falsification, or plagiarism in proposing, performing, or reviewing research, or in reporting research results. And we all know fabrication is making up data or results without doing your experiment. You can put together some data. And falsification is taking results from another experiment and presenting it as something else. Okay, and plagiarism is the appropriation of another person's ideas, processes, results, or words without giving appropriate credit. So this is a strict definition that we follow when we make a finding of research misconduct. So I'm going to ask, are you liable? Because research is a collaborative process. So you don't do all the work in a paper or you put in a grant application. You rely on your laboratory members and collaborators, and you put together this grant. And are you liable when there is a fabricated data or plagiarized text? I'm asking the audience this question. Do you think it's a yes or no? Please type in your chat box. But while you're doing that, let's see what we can do to prevent these scenarios. So if someone is giving you data to be included in grant or papers, please use valid data or verify the data and verify the data. And do not plagiarize any text and avoid placeholder images, because it seems to be a practice in some labs, or is it an excuse when questioned. But if you have the habit of using placeholders, they tend to forget, and that it leads you into questions about the data integrity. So avoid placeholder. I also want to let you know that in recent cases that were heard by administrative law judge, the judge established that a PI and or a corresponding author can be liable for research misconduct, even if he or she was completely unaware of any falsification or plagiarism. So the answer to the question, you are at the risk of being liable for research misconduct. So we need to be careful about our data, where we put. So yes, research misconduct findings, in addition to proving FFP by a preponderance of the evidence. FFP is falsification, fabrication, and plagiarism. So in addition to proving there is FFP, we have to also show that it was committed intentionally, knowingly, or recklessly, because honest error is not considered misconduct. Even though a lot of respondents claim that they made a mistake, but there are ways to show that it is not actually a mistake. And we will see some examples at the end of my talk. We also should show that there is a significant departure from accepted practices. And we know what are the accepted practices in our relevant research community. So when we recommend a research misconduct finding at the public health service level or at the institutional level, so in summary, FFP should be proven and the intentional, knowing, or reckless mindset should be proven, which has to be from an individual. So we have to establish who is responsible for this FFP. And then we recommend a finding of misconduct. So quickly to go through the steps in a misconduct proceeding, it starts with an allegation by somebody, like colleagues, peer reviewers, and co-authors, journal editors. Anybody can make an allegation to anyone, example, institutional officials, funding agency, journals, and directly to our office, ORI. And then this gets forwarded to, after the assessment, it gets to the research integrity officer at the institution where the research actually took place, because that's where the data will be, and they are the responsible officials at the universities or intramural institutions. They do then assessment and organize the remaining institutional process, which involves inquiry to determine if there is enough evidence to move forward, or is this real allegation that requires looking further through an investigational process, which happens at the institutions with a committee of scientists who are experts in the area of science that is questioned. And at the end of the process, the report, inquiry report and investigation reports are submitted to our office, ORI, and we do an oversight review of everything that's submitted and maybe additional analysis, and we do look through everything and determine whether we are recommending an additional finding or not. And if there's insufficient evidence, we do not make a separate finding. And when we make a finding, we also recommend actions, administrative actions, including fixing research record, suspend, terminate PHS funding, and prohibit advisory role or debar the individual from future funding. So it varies based on the scope of the problem and the level of the individual, whether they are grad student, postdoc, junior, senior, things like that. We take a lot into consideration when we recommend this finding. And when there is a PHS finding, all findings are published in the Federal Register, ORI website and newsletter, and the NIH website. So a scientist's career is kind of not, it won't survive after. So this is also why we all have to be careful when we do our research and report our results. Patricia already indicated that our role, every one of us have a role in preventing research misconduct. And as you know, prevention is better than getting into this misconduct proceedings. So researchers, funding agencies, institutions, whistleblowers, when you see something, don't hesitate to report. And journals, peer reviewers, most of the time reviewers miss these issues because they are focused so much on science, nobody's looking for problems. And so anyway, because the research starts at the data is collected at the researcher's lab, let's look at what pushes them to do FFP. Perceived pressure is a big thing, and I don't need to list the type of pressure the researchers are going through. It's the publication pressure, the laboratory PI is pressurizing, institutions pressure for promotions, personal visa situation and financial situations, and the patient groups and the public. There's a lot of pressure for researchers to do their research and publish. Pressure is one aspect, but then they rationalize by saying, oh, it's okay, I have this deadline, or it's okay, I have to, I have to do this so that my visa will be extended. There's so many other reasons, similar reasons that were pressuring them will also, it's okay, I've done this before, nobody caught me, and I can do a little more. I told you about the slippery slope situation. So researchers rationalize their or justify their work being falsified or fabricated. And there's, together with all these, the opportunity pushed them into doing it. The opportunity comes from lack of supervision, lack of mentoring, lack of somebody to tell them that's wrong to do, and no one is looking kind of thing. So all these are aspects that contribute to the researchers into doing the wrong thing. So I'm going to show you some statements the actual respondents told us during interviews, during our misconduct proceedings. Say, for example, competitive pressures are there. I felt it was necessary to get a paper in a high-profile journal in order to get a faculty position, real problem. And then there are personal circumstances. I had been applying for a green card and felt pressured to make a good paper and get good publications. Or individual psychology, yeah. Half of me wanted to make my PI proud. The other half was terrified of failing. So I fabricated a piece of data. Another example, I told you the opportunity and poor supervision. I was scared to go to my PI. He used to scream and yell, and this is very common. We see this in our cases. So if things don't work, he screams. And inadequate training, as I mentioned before, after 2 years of postdoctoral fellowship, I still don't know how to properly publish Western blot data. So all these and more, I mean, these are just a little glimpse of what we see in cases. So I mentioned earlier, I'll show examples, and whether it's honest error or intentional manipulation, by looking at the type of manipulation, you could tell. So on the left is a figure in Nature Medicine publication. On the right is NIH grant application with figures. And I hope you guys identified already there are problems between the two, or the reuse of figure in left in a NIH grant application. However, they were kind of manipulated so people don't immediately see the identity. And now you probably see the same cells have been cut and made into 3 different panels on the right in NIH grant application to fake some new data. But I'm saying in this grant application figure, there's more problems. Do you see any problem in here? Yes, I do. It's not so obvious, but look at this. These are exactly the same cells, duplicated to represent 2 different data points. It's not just that. These are also copied and pasted to give a new data. Yes, you can tell the respondent that's the case, but they are going to argue, no, look, they are different. So as investigators, we have to go further to prove that they are in fact similar. So look at the features. When you enhance the intensity and adjust the size, there are features that are telltale signs of being exactly the same. Okay, so this is intentional data manipulation, fabrication, and falsification. And then these two, I mean, it's very hard to know they are similar, but when you do the same thing to these, look at these features. They are exactly the same. So this is what, it's just the beginning step of proving this is an intentional manipulation. Then we have to go and prove who did it and all that kind of, there's a lot of steps that we have to go through to, prove someone committed misconduct. This is another example of a figure that appeared in a journal, but these are supposedly pancreatic tumor cells infected with bacteria anyway. But these figures were put together from different figures. This was a grant figure, but this is not the same experimental sample. And here you can see. Easy, right? Without doing the experiment, you can put together a new figure and publish the figure. And you also, I want you to notice, sorry, I did that. Anyway, this is a hepatic tumor, if you see. Here, this is a hepatic tumor apparently, but presented as pancreatic tumor, two different tissues even, not just the experimental situation was manipulated. And I'll quickly show you a clinical data manipulation. This is a follow-up visit records, research records that were provided. So visits were dated 1/18/88, and I want you to pay attention to the remark and the date. So the follow-up visit, patient is fine, and the other follow-up visit, also the patient is fine, right? Here you can see in the red rectangles. So that was in November 88. Now 89 March, also the patient is fine, and last seen on 1990 February, again, the patient was fine. But then in the actual patient chart, the death certificate was dated September 29, 87. That's 28 months prior to the last reported follow-up in 90, and 4 months prior to the first follow-up visit. So in clinical cases, sometimes the data and the recordings are really helpful. They are just there in front of you. But so what type of data they falsify generally? Patient interviews and entry criteria, approval forms. Usually the labs results, because the technicians who collect samples will collect their own and split into like 90 samples or so, or one patient sample is split into many, like blood or urine, something like that. And we have had cases falsifying all those kind of things. And with those examples, I will hand over to Patricia to continue.
All right, thank you, Ranjini. Okay, so as we all know, research misconduct proceedings really need to be confidential. You want to protect the identity of the respondent and, of course, the whistleblower, any other individuals involved. But there may come a point where the institution needs to contact the NIH when they identify certain issues with grants. And so
figure in left.
Proceedings really need to be confidential. You want to protect the identity of the respondent and, of course, the whistleblower, any other individuals involved. But there may come a point where the institution needs to contact the NIH when they identify certain issues with grants. And so here I just wanted to run through some instances where it is appropriate to contact and required for you to contact the NIH. So these are changes in project and budget. So if there are any developments that have a significant impact on the award-supported activities, you definitely want to contact the NIH. For instance, if a PI is is on administrative leave, and you may need to have a new PI installed or added to the grant, and you'll have to get prior approval from the NIH to do so. You'll have to notify the NIH of problems, delays, or adverse conditions which materially impair the ability to meet the objectives of the award. So if you identify issues that really tell you that the research can't go forward, you may need a change in scope. And again, that requires prior approval, so you'll need to contact the NIH. The notification to the NIH should include a statement of the action taken or contemplated and any assistance needed to resolve the situation. So we're here to work with you when you encounter these difficulties. So just make sure that you always keep in contact with us when you encounter these things. And there are other instances where you may need to contact the NIH. For instance, if you identify false statements related to research misconduct, you'll need to report that to the NIH or to the HHS Office of it's OIG. And again, research misconduct findings, as Ranjini said, require that you identify the individual responsible. However, you may identify that the research is unreliable and it can't be trusted. So again, you'll want to let us know when that's the case. So we could administratively recover any misspent grant funds. We could also, the government may pursue administrative, civil, or criminal actions under a variety of statutes related to fraud and making false statements or claims. So just wanted to give you a heads up of that. And I think my last slide here is this brief case study. So we can kind of discuss this more in our chat, in our conversation after discussion after this presentation. But let me just run through it with you quickly. So months into a research misconduct investigation, it's becoming clear that data in an NIH application were reused and relabeled as different experiments, like Ranjini just showed you. The actual experiments were never conducted. Now, the PI of the grant notifies university officials that he has a tentative job offer at a new institution out of state. So he thinks he's going to, drive off into the sunset and start anew. But this job offer requires that he brings the NIH grant with him. So he asked the current university to relinquish the active NIH grant to his new university. Now, the PI's current institution has reservations about transferring the grant, especially since the data in the application may be unreliable. So this is something that I want you to think about. What should the institution do? Should it go ahead and relinquish the grant? Again, just a reminder, the grants go to the institutions, not to the individual. So these are the institution's grants. Should they take other actions? Should they keep the grant? Should they terminate the grant? So that's something that we can discuss more very shortly. Okay, and then the next slide, this is just closing, showing you our website. So if you have any questions about NIH processes on how we handle research integrity, there's FAQs here as well. Feel free to visit our website here, Research Integrity. And then I'll hand it over to Ranjini.
Yeah, if you have questions about misconduct proceedings or educational materials on research integrity, please write to us. There is an Ask ORI email that you can write if you want to make an allegation or if you want to find out how to make an allegation. And many other educational resources are on our website. Please visit our website. And if you want to have more information, please call one of us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. So now we'll move to the Q&A portion of the session. So we have a number of questions here already, but just a reminder, use the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. Okay, so let's get started. So first, is it possible to submit an anonymous allegation?
I can start. Ranjini, I see you're muted.
Yeah. No,
go ahead.
Yes, it is possible. We will honor the request of being anonymous, and we won't even ask for the name. But know that along the process, people may guess who made the allegation, but that's a different thing. But yes, you can make allegation anonymously. If you have further questions on that, you can call our office and we will explain that.
Yeah, and then I'll also add that, different kinds of allegations can be submitted to the NIH. There's different portals for different kinds of allegations, but I'll say in general, we have a mailbox called this NIH Research Integrity. Let me just make sure I have the address right. Yeah, NIH Research Integrity at mail.nih.gov. That's another place that you can submit an allegation.
Yeah, so ORI allegation portal, either you can call us or ask ORI at hhs.gov. Yeah.
Thank you. Are bullying and sexual misconduct by a person in power on the study considered research integrity issues?
So in our office, so it's not a research misconduct issue, but we would handle that as an integrity issue, because we do understand that, this type of unsafe environment could lead to, problems in the research environment. So there's a requirement that institutions provide a safe and healthful work environment for the conduct of research. And when we receive allegations about harassment or bullying that involve NIH research, we will go to the institution, try and get more information about what the process was, how did they handle the investigation, what did they do, and in some cases, we can remove the individual from the grant. The institution can do this depending on what exactly the finding was. So we can take different administrative actions at that point.
Thank
you.
We
have done that.
Right. What offices at the federal level are involved in the investigation stage? For example, when is DHS and FBI involved? And what happens after that initial investigation with DHS or FBI for a PI's research investigation?
Should I get that? Yeah. FBI is not involved in research misconduct investigations unless there are other concerns than scientific data problems. So FBI is generally, we don't, they are not involved in research misconduct per se investigations.
Right, and I'll add that, as I showed in the slide, one of the first slides, we do handle different integrity concerns. One of them is foreign interference. And so that's one type of case where, we have individuals that have not disclosed other support, other jobs they have overseas. They may have received duplicate funding for NIH work and the same funding overseas. So there's a lot of concerns here. And so when it looks like it's a very egregious case, we can take administrative actions, like I described before. We do that, but we can also refer the case or the allegation to the Office of the Inspector General, so OIG, and they will conduct their assessment and determine whether or not they need to send that over to FBI. But it's pretty rare for the cases that we have, but it does happen. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Does NIH typically review applications with an enhanced eye for fabrication?
Now that's a good question. We don't routinely screen applications at this time, and we are looking into methodologies that might allow us to do that in the future. But we get a lot of applications, as you know. So screening them would be very, very time consuming. We do make sure that the reviewers are aware of the policies when they are reviewing an application and they come across something that they have a question about or they suspect could be potential research misconduct. They are instructed to keep it confidential, share it only with the SRO, who then shares it with my office. So we do have a process in place to handle these allegations, but right now we don't have a screening process, I would say.
But having said that, many allegations come through actual grant review process and forwarded to ORI through Patricia's office. So it is not uncommon to identify problems in grant applications.
Thank you. Could you please highlight any reporting differences for foreign institutions and the ORI annual statements?
I think that's about the assurance.
Yeah, that's an assurance question. So usually foreign institutions are funded through some, Patricia can tell me, through some local here US institutions. And so their annual report comes through together. But I don't want to pretend like I know the answer to that, but this is my understanding. So you can call our office and there is an assurance office. They can clarify that issue.
Thank you. One attendee notes it would be helpful if the attendees could get those 2 ALJ decisions that Ranjini mentioned in her presentation. don't know if we've got links.
I don't have it right here. I can find it and send it, but the respondent's name, Saar and Krepke, two separate respondents, but I have to say there were other issues in those cases, not just putting something that they didn't know in a grant application, but there were other problems also. There are other manipulations. And in addition to that, the statements from ALJ kind of explicitly said that whether you know it or not, you are the PI kind of. So I will find it now.
Thank you.
The two decisions, and or else you can email me if you know. Go to ORI website and ask ORI. We can send it to you.
Thank you. Is the NIH's assessment process similar to an investigation under the PHS research misconduct rules?
Okay, I'll answer that one. So the investigations occur at the research institutions or universities. So that's where the investigation actually happens. ORI has oversight responsibility. So when the investigation is complete, they send the report to ORI. ORI reviews it, as Ranjini said, and then determines whether or not more needs to be done. So on the NIH side, we conduct what we call preliminary assessments. And so it's really, that's even before an inquiry or investigation. So we're really at the early stage. We conduct the preliminary assessment to determine whether or not NIH funds are involved, whether the allegation is specific or credible. And when we make the determination, then we will send it over to ORI as a referral.
Thank you. What, if any, are the repercussions for the host institution if a researcher is found guilty of research misconduct?
You want to take it?
Yeah, okay. So if a researcher is found guilty of research misconduct, so as Ranjini mentioned, that they could go into, they could possibly be debarred, they could be restricted from serving in peer review, require additional oversight, et cetera, et cetera. Now, the research institution itself could be potentially liable for false claims if there was falsified or fabricated data included in an NIH application. So that's something that they could be liable for. And sometimes if there's an extensive amount of research misconduct, what we can do is recover funds. So we can go back to the institution and ask them to repay us for either part or all of the grant if all the products of the grant were not reliable based on this research misconduct findings. So that's another thing. That's another, I guess, way that the host institution could be liable for that. So those are the main ways.
Great, thank you. We've about 5 minutes left, so just a few more questions. Would falsely claiming in a publication that an NIH-funded study was approved by the institutional IRB be considered a form of fabrication?
It's violation of the protocol. No, it's not misconduct, but it's protocol violation. Usually, Office of Human Research Protections will handle that allegation.
Okay, thank you. What recommendations do you have for sub-investigators or staff when the PI is on a slippery slope, but actions have not yet risen to the level of being reportable?
Blowing the whistle. I know they are at risk. There is some protection for whistleblowers, but it's not always an ideal situation, and they are victimized. The right thing is to make a complaint to the Rio, but it's their decision. But at the end, all of them are going to be dragged into it when it goes to investigation. So I cannot advise other than saying, see something, say something. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll just add that, we can't take actions when there are no findings necessarily made. For instance, if a person was found to have not been saving data, they didn't save any of the raw data, we could impose specific award conditions on grants to make sure that they do share with us the raw data and report on a more frequent basis, so we can take particular actions if someone is on that slippery slope, but it's not quite research misconduct.
Thank you. Why aren't those that are found guilty of fabrication or falsification debarred for life versus just a specific number of years?
So we determine the number of years based on the scope of the misconduct. Some do have, we do have found lifetime debarments on cases where there's large scope of misconduct. But it's a career, decision for some people. And so it's determined based on the scope. That's the short answer. You don't punish. It's not a punitive action. It's a deterrent and corrective action for scientists. So that's how it's determined. Yeah. And I saw a link that Scott Pryor put in about the ALJ decision on Krepke case. So thank you for that. There was another question.
Right. Is there, and this I think has to be one of the last questions, is there a publicly accessible website that provides research misconduct case summaries?
Yes, ORI website lists case summaries. If you go to ORI, you can read case summaries that are like a few years back. So they'll give you a flavor of what type of cases we make findings on and what kind of actions are taken based on the scope. Yeah.
And they're also published in the NIH guide. And I just want to quickly add, because I had the case study, we didn't really talk about it too much. So, so the institution's grants, there's a problem with the grant application. The PI wants to move to the institution, take the grant with them. The best thing for that institution to do is to not relinquish the grant because there's a problem with the grant. Either terminate it, do a bilateral termination, or depending on the scope of the misconduct, if it's possible that they have another PI there at their institution who could continue part of the work. If there was a change in scope, they can work with us to do that as well. But ideally, the grant wouldn't be transferred. So, thanks.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we're out of time. So thank you for an informative session and for the participants' really excellent questions. If you have additional questions, please visit our exhibit hall staff for chat and one-on-one opportunities, where you can always find contact information in the help section of our grants.nih.gov website. And your feedback is very important. So it would be wonderful if you could please take a moment to let us know what you thought by clicking on the session feedback button located with the description and presenters on the auditorium list of sessions. And when you're completely done with the seminar, please also complete the overall survey form in the navigation bar at the top of the page. So thank you all again and have a great day.
Thank you.